Welcome everyone to this future-proof container terminal episode. Today we got a really interesting guest, Johan-Paul Verschuure, aka JP, and I will define why interesting. JP had been working as a director at Rebel Group, a financial strategic advisor firm well known in our maritime industry. And especially these days that we're hearing more and more about different type of technologies coming into the maritime industry, all these challenges we are currently facing from a macroeconomic point of view, it will be really, really great to hear JP's thoughts. So with that being said, JP, welcome to the virtual stage.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks a lot. Happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Great. So JP, the plan for today is that we have been putting together some questions around what is going on today. You know, I may say a lot of things going on. And the plan is to go through them. Just feel free to share your thoughts. And if that is okay for you, let's go for it.
Sure. Happy to go for it.
So JP,
fire away.
Yeah. So before starting, for those who haven't got the chance to meet you yet or work together with you, could you share a little bit more about who is JP?
Yeah, very much so. JP Verschuure, it's a difficult name to pronounce outside Holland. So based in Rotterdam, working for Rebel, as you said, in the Port and Logistics Advisory Group. What we do is a lot of market studies, strategic studies for port developments, greenfield ports, tenders, M&A work when ports are being sold or acquired by different companies. A lot of financial institutions. Before joining Rebel, used to work for 8 years in London, so a lot of transaction-related work over there. But now based in Rotterdam, and in addition to all the market study, we do a lot of work on what the energy transition means for ports. The wider Rebel Group also works on a lot of normal infrastructure, road, rail, hospitals, schools, and mostly on the combination of the public and private side to see how they can cooperate to get this infrastructure up and running. And that's also the perspective we take on ports. So happy to, from that perspective, to share some thoughts on what's going on in maritime domain and how we can try to make them more smoother in the future.
Great. And as we always discuss, it's really interesting to hear your thoughts, especially of the latest things going on in the market. So JP, I really like to ask this question, and I will just grab the opportunity and ask you. So how would you define terminal operations in one word?
Arteries of global trade. I think last few years is even more so. Obviously, I've been involved in the industry for over 15 years with only business cases in ports, and obviously everyone inside the industry already knew it, how important the container terminals are and smooth operations. I think last 2 years has only shown it to the rest of the world, and I expect we'll make some headlines in the next few years as well. I don't think it's gone away. So arteries.
And you think this is because the business has been evolving in a different pace, so to say, versus what we are currently deploying from an equipment and technology point of view, or for any other reason?
Well, arteries, I think it's often the newspaper or general news outlet, they look at the demand side, right? That's fast moving, changing. It's what is most interesting everyone to jump on it, and people often forget how important the supply side of the economy is as well. Like, can we actually produce it? Can we adjust our economies in terms of labor, equipment, infrastructure, everything to the right demand? And I think the last 2 years have shown how volatile things can be. Like, after a long time of fairly stable, predictive growth and development, that's the biggest thing to adjust infrastructure and equipment to the volatile current situation, and that's the most interesting part, and that therefore it's clearly visible that that good container terminals and efficient operations are essential for the world.
And well, I may also add here that we need to see the terminal as a node. It's just a piece from the whole supply chain, you know. And if we take a look to the big picture, then we can understand a little bit more of what is really happening behind all this, no?
Yeah, and it's indeed it's a node, and what is most important of that part is actually it's the node where people can actually most easily see what is going on in supply chains. So a vessel offshore, people don't realize how many big vessels there are offshore, so the public outside the maritime domain. And also like all the trucks that move everywhere, everyone obviously sees the trucks, but they don't realize how many trucks and where they're all moving. So, but ports, it's very concentrated. And I think that's also what is highlighting the last probably year, all the struggles in the ports. That's where you see the big piles of containers piling up and the problems. Whereas, the problems are all over the supply chain. And I would say like not to the greatest extent inside the port, but mostly outside, but it's visible within the port. So therefore, it's even more important that the ports are doing well.
Yeah, so now starting to jump into the main topic of today, it will be great, JP, if you can start the session with some highlight of from a supply chain point of view. What are we currently facing in the different markets, in North America, in Latin America, Europe, and Asia?
Yeah. No, yeah, I think the key message of today, we just had a brief chat, and actually we're speaking on continuous terms. I think what is the big change now is that markets are differentiating from each other. Like last decade, I think all markets were moving in a similar way with similar characteristics, dynamics, etc. And now, obviously, with the volatility, now the really detailed characteristics come floating up or emerging to the surface, and thereby like the problems are entirely different. And when we had the previous chat, I think the situation was even different from what it's now with the current developments over in Asia or in China specific. It's even more. So you really have to differentiate between all kind of markets nowadays. And it's been widely covered. So it's a lot of things that are known. But I think obviously the big port congestion problems are mostly in the US, in North America. Whereas a great differentiation between the ports in Europe. It's challenging. There are quite a lot of problems, obviously, with all kind of COVID-related aspects, and then all of a sudden, like the Asia is popping up again, and that's constantly these different markets are in volatile or turbulent waters, causing all kind of ripple effects throughout. And that's I think the biggest thing. It's just not one market anymore. It's all kind of different parts of the market, and it's too complex to really see the interconnections between the different parts.
Yeah, really, really interesting. And I may say no one escaped from this one. It doesn't matter in which country you're currently living, for sure you will get less or maybe a little bit more impact due to all these situations. These days we are all aware of what is going on in the war. Sadly, we are facing this Russia-Ukraine conflict these days. On top of that, we are aware of this new wave in Shanghai, and for all those involved in the maritime, shipping and logistics, it's quite many challenges that probably we will not face today, but for sure in the upcoming weeks. And all these results, in the longer port stays, shifting of volumes, line adjusting routes. So it will be great if you can share a little bit more about this topic.
You mentioned quite a lot of things. It's things that are a result of, and things that are causes of all the disruptions. Just to start, like one thing that you were mentioning is the longer port stays. What we can see is all across the world, port stays are longer, but the reasons for the port stays it's that they're being longer is actually quite different. So what we see, for example, in North American market, it's where the port stays have increased. It's mostly productivity related, so difficulties on the yards to actually get the containers away, thereby lower crane productivity, berthing windows that have been missed, those kind of reasons. Whereas in Europe, for example, what has happened is that a lot of liners reduced their loops. Typically, liners would call at several ports, and they reduced their loops by a couple of port calls, and thereby introducing a new loop with a different call or a different structure. In some cases, for example, deep sea call from Rotterdam was shifted to Piraeus and then feedered in from Greece. Such change in structures did also happen last year. But as a result, it wasn't so much that the longer port stays weren't only caused by lower crane productivity, but also quite a lot by increased call sizes. So, for example, in Rotterdam and Antwerp, that caused roughly 2/3 of the longer port stays were actually by larger call sizes. Obviously, that would also have problems for the berthing windows, and obviously vessels arriving late, having problems on the reliability of reliability index and those kind of things. But it's less of a problem than actually lower productivity, because it's just a shift of volumes, and it's, you match it to published schedules, so it's a different cause. And also in Europe, all the transshipment structures are actually quite helpful when you want to alleviate the pain across several ports. So when there was one port having problems, shipping lines can adjust their shipping structures to call it the problematic port in a different way at the later moment, not making sure that the main line would actually continue. Whereas, for example, in North America, those structures are not that possible, because vessels don't deviate. Because of the Jones Act, it's not that easy or it's not possible to do transshipment in that sense. So you can have multiple calls, but it's more difficult to reroute cargo. So what you could actually see, for example, North America, you see Los Angeles struggling very much with a huge surge in demand for containers, whereas Oakland had a bit of a pickup, and actually Port Metro or Prince Rupert in Canada actually saw a decline over the last 2 years, which are pretty much all are serving U.S. Midwest. So there would be possibilities to reroute cargoes in a different way. And then when that happened, when some cargoes were rerouted, then the problems were shifted to somewhere else because everyone was rerouting at the same time. So it's a strange dynamic due to shipping structures, due to laws, different kind of structure with unions, all kind of aspects adding up. And I think it's important for the industry to really analyze the different structures whether it's in Asia, whether it's in Europe, whether it's across Africa or North America, to learn from what is going on, and actually try to make it as market driven as possible, because that's typically when the easiest solutions are being found.
Yeah, really, really interesting. And I am supporting customers worldwide on these automation journeys from a process and equipment level, and also this eco-efficiency journey according to the regions. And there are many things they need to target on top to what is currently happening in the industry. And I am quite aware you're also supporting customers, and especially on a critical phase, that not only choosing the different handling concept, but also elaborating all these business case. And it will be great if you can share a little bit more about your findings, because I am also, it's quite cool, all these findings when it comes to the business case point of view, because at the end you need to have some volume, and the financial will have a really big role in all those investments.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the financials are very important. So at Rebel, we make a lot of business cases, or we make valuations for ports. So all these aspects are very important. Obviously, most recently, it's a hot topic is also about the inflation protection that ports are providing. So a lot of institutional investors, for the last decade, they really liked port assets, because typically you can increase your revenues in line with inflation. You can pass on the inflation to your customers, but in the contracts you have to be very clear on how to do that. And on the other side, on the cost side, you have to make sure that you're not overly exposed to for example, higher fuel rates or electricity rates. So managing those kind of aspects has received more attention these days. Obviously, the labor shortages at the moment is of particular interest. So there's quite a lot of open vacancies for job adverts, for example, in Northwest Europe, in the ports. There's so much work, there's so much demand that there's a need of staffing for these terminals. So getting the right staff, and also at the right price level, that is of importance. Well, we've seen also the last few days on the happenings on P&O what different staffing costs can do for a business case in a very competitive market where a lot of the RoRo are active. That that can be a differentiator how different companies, ports, terminals, shipping lines are dealing with these situations. That's for sure. So on the business side, there's a lot moving. Also for your personal interest, obviously the automation that keeps being very very valid. On the one hand, it's it's a good place for additional jobs. On the other hand, it's a very robust system to have automated terminals from a long-term perspective. But obviously, it's still a long learning curve, and but it's getting in the right direction. So we expect this to continue and to go further, and obviously there's a lot of attention given to automation opportunities.
Yeah, that's totally right, and that's why I make the split between process automation and equipment automation, because it depends basically on the region we are talking to. It makes sense from a business case point of view to invest in any of in some of the cases, both of them, but in some others, starting with some process automation, it is the one that really makes sense. But that's the reality, and you just mentioned all the factors to keep in mind when making all these business case.
Yeah, and then you're talking about the terminal in itself, but and there's also a great opportunity, and I know a lot of the listeners today will have experience or are reading into it. But it's also the interfaces with other parts of the supply chain where the big opportunities lie, and we see that also happening for example for agency freight forwarding services, and that that will also make increase the capacity of the system, right? So it's not only the capacity of the terminal itself, but it's of the entire artery extended with the hinterland logistics, and that's it's also automation in that direction, which is it's very exciting to see and a great opportunities, and we see it in our work as well. So it's not only like the let's call the more typical market analysis, but it's also having more applications of digital solutions and what can be done there. So we get a lot of requests on what kind of software applications can be enhancing the entire logistic and supply chain, and thereby the commercial position of port. So it's also I think a lot of players in the terminal operation department are looking reaching into the hinterland further with digital solutions.
Yeah, totally agree. And there is a really interesting topic here, and I know you're heavily involved, and this is energy transition. It will be great if you can first explain on a high level what is this energy transition, and especially in Europe we are hearing quite a lot this topic. So it will be great to hear your thoughts and challenges we are currently facing.
It's a very interesting aspect of the maritime domain, of the maritime industry, is how to ensure everyone has the right form of energy. Obviously, there's a great interest to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and also to reshuffle supply chains in a way that is preferable from a political, ethical point of view. The energy transition can actually work. And basically the energy transition, it means that we're getting renewable energy from different parts of the world. In the older days, or like let's say the past decade, and actually currently still, it's more difficult to get renewable energy from over longer distances. And we're trying to come up with a solution to do that, to have renewable energy tied to different kind of molecules, there are many carriers which are out there and which are studied at the moment, and each has a different characteristic in terms of chemical aspects, which have a great influence on how they would be handled in the maritime domain, or in ports, or in carriers. So it can range from high pressure, very low temperature, up until normal temperature, but more toxic. Can have implications for safety regulations. Also, the energy density of the various molecules are different. So we're talking about an increase in the number of vessel movements for the same amount of energy, or less so. So there's a huge number of factors which are going to where a decision has to be made, and a lot of players are still undecided on where to go. I think Maersk is most active in pushing out the methanol direction, and then obviously players are following that, but also similar initiatives are taking place for ammonia and for hydrogen itself, liquid hydrogen. So will be different timing, different solutions. It also depends on local regulation or whatever the local storage abilities are.
Yeah, and JP, probably this is a little bit difficult to answer, but based on your studies and cases, we should consider got the fastest ROI, wind power, solar power.
I think the types of renewable can be different in any place. It depends on the local circumstances, whether there's a lot of sun, whether there's a lot of wind, when there's mountains to hydropower. So I think the types of renewable energy will depend on each different geographic. I think that's the most interesting part, that the energy supply system will be much more diversified. So it will be diversified in terms of what the source is, but also where it's coming from. And because it's coming from more directions, it will also mean smaller flows per direction. So probably somewhat smaller vessel calls, but at least also not very big concentration in terms of geographical position where it's coming from. So that's actually has a more stable or diversified supply chain as a consequence. If something happens to a particular producer, we're less reliable on that particular producer, and we can kind of switch the system probably easier. Albeit that in the ramp up phase, probably there will be a lot of demand for the same kind of renewable energies.
Yeah, really interesting answer. And I actually asked this one is just to confirm again that if you're evaluating any type of automation, starting your eco-efficiency journey or evaluating energy transition, there is no like a copy paste from your competitor. Basically, you need to address and identify your opportunities, your challenges, especially the local ones, to make this work.
Yeah. You have to understand your full logistic chain to do so, and it's often forgotten how difficult it is to manage steps in the logistic chain, albeit that they're not huge in terms of monetary value or in risk. It can be very difficult to manage them in the right way. So and it's difficult to understand each step and how the different players are acting on that, and that's it's a big challenge for the entire industry. But a very nice one, definitely.
Yeah, totally agree. And JP, I know we can spend all day here talking about these topics. They are really interesting, and I am aware you're quite busy, and I will just like to wrap up the session, and I would like to hear your message for worldwide colleagues that are evaluating, different type of technologies, or maybe starting their eco-efficiency journey, or even now evaluating this energy transition.
Yeah, well, I think the key message is understand your own supply chain. There's not one solution for all supply chains. So understand your own supply chain to every detail. That will be the key message, as has been shown in the last 2 years. The problems can be very different for different locations, geographics, and different markets, as we'll see in the energy transition. The challenges will be entirely different from other commodities. So the supply side is very complex. When everything functions, supply side is a given, but it's actually not that easy. So understand every detail of the supply side.
Great, JP. So really appreciate this session with you, and looking forward to have you in the future one. And let's see the comments from our worldwide colleagues after this one.
Looking forward to hearing. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, JP.
Cheers.